Are Doppo Orochi and Yujiro Hanma friends? Because they definitely did not start off that way. I want to cast your mind back to a simpler time in Baki, before all the cloning and resurrecting, back when the most impressive feat at the time was the destruction of a concrete pipe, or maybe the bare-handed slaying of a Siberian tiger, which is, to be fair, a crazy feat. A simpler time, when the designation of the world's strongest was still up for some debate. At the peak of this era in Baki, there were two individuals whose presence and years of battles against all sorts of opponents meant they had garnered the attention of the international martial arts community and were seen as pillars of unimaginable and unquestioning strength. They are Doppo Orochi, the god of war and the founder of Shinshinkai Karate, and Yujiro Hanma, the world's strongest creature. Both of these characters since their introduction have maintained their relevancy throughout the series and will go on to have fights and character moments crucial to the wider story of Baki. This is despite the obvious disparity in strength between the two as the story would continue. As it stands, Doppo and Yujiro would go from being enemies to somewhat actual friends. They have similar interests, expectations of their sons, terrifying reputations, and a shared love of fighting. For different reasons, but we'll get to that. From the moment their fight was announced, Itagaki began to draw parallels between the two, which would continue after the childhood saga and then re-continue in the Maximum Tournament. So, let's talk about them both and give a rundown of their battle in the underground arena and the subsequent fallout from that fight. Once you've liked, shared, subscribed, hyped, and considered becoming a member, thank you very much. Doppo Orochi is introduced to us in the first chapter of Grappler Baki, and it's one of the most impressive introductions in the series. He's the director of the Shinshinkai Karate School. He's also rumored to have killed a tiger with his bare hands, and to demonstrate his power, he's placed inside a concrete pipe, which he promptly turns to dust with only the power of his body. And might I also add that he's 55 years old at this point in time. He watches Baki's fight against Suedo, and you'll probably recognize from now on, in almost all major fights of Baki's and others, Doppo will probably be in the crowd somewhere pulling this exact expression or giving us, the viewer, some breakdown it is of what we're seeing. Doppo is basically used by Itagaki not only to explain some of the stronger techniques in the series, but it also goes to some length to show us that Doppo is a genius martial artist who is familiar with almost all types of techniques and fighting, even if he's a karateka by trade. At the end of Baki and Suedo's fight, the Shinshinkai school look to come and start a fight with Baki. Doppo then stops in and manages to persuade them to leave Baki be. This is one of my favorite panels, by the way. I just love this expression. It's the barely controlled rage. After all of this, Suedo gets up ready to continue the fight until Doppo squeezes him into unconsciousness and carries him away. Later, after the medal ceremony that Baki doesn't attend, Doppo arrives in time to prevent Kato from being dog-walked by Motobe. Motobe adds to Doppo's already significant amount of epithets by referring to him as the man-eater, before saying he'd beat him in a fight and leaving. At some point after this, Doppo takes Kato out for a meal and reveals that he'd like to impart his own special karate to his former pupil, which is essentially real karate, the type of karate that allows you to maim and hurt people, and not for the purpose of winning traditional tournaments. He then promptly embarrasses Kato and even takes a full-on kick to the balls, which he doesn't feel, as Doppo uses an Okinawan karate technique to pull his testicles into his abdomen. And you know what? I'll master it for the next video easily, as long as I get 100 likes. 10 likes. Doppo then reveals the existence of the underground arena, where martial artists can go to have no rules-based fights, and tells Kato that it's the perfect place to grow as a fighter. Doppo takes Kato to watch Baki's fight against Kosho Shinogi, the cord cutter, who's one of the many characters I'm quite sad to see left behind in Baki, I'll be honest. And in the same chapter, chapter 27, Tokugawa makes first mention of Baki's father, Yujiro, the strongest being on Earth. Although I don't think we hear Yujiro's name said until Motobe brings it up in chapter 30. I could be wrong about that. To bring this back to Doppo, however, he's in the audience watching Baki's fight against Mount Toba and provides his classic commentary throughout. To say he's a fan of Baki's would probably be an understatement. And he has another reason as to why he's been following his career since meeting him in person at the start of the series. And that reason is Yujiro, so let's talk about him. Which is actually going to be quite difficult because in early Baki, there was very little to actually know about Yujiro. Our earliest partial face reveal comes in chapter 35, and up to this point, all we know is that Tokugawa referred to him as being the strongest being on Earth. Which is obviously a pretty sweet title, but everyone's got one of those. Don't forget that Doppo is called the God of War, the Tiger Slayer, and Man-Eater. A few chapters earlier, Stridum had approached Baki to tell him that Yujiro gets stronger every single day, something he hasn't stopped doing even now, I would say as well, and that as it stands, he has no shot of defeating him. Motivate also before this calls Yujiro a genius, but he does this in the same breath as calling Hanada a genius, and where the hell is Hanada nowadays? I know he's just made a return to Baki Rahen, but still. Anyway, these almost whispered rumors and statements do plenty to create an air of strength and mystery around Yujiro in a way that seems to rival the way people talk about Doppo Orochi. And the comparisons between the two do not stop there by a long shot. During the fight with Toba, both Doppo and Yujiro have very similar analyses of the fight they're witnessing from different areas of the arena. Both of them basically saying that Baki is taking Toba and his profession as a wrestler too lightly. As Baki looks like he's about to lose, he has a flashback to his childhood and this horrific memory of Yujiro teaching his son what it means to truly lose as a martial artist. This spurs him on to eventually defeat Toba. This is far from the last time we'll see Yujiro just attack, maim, and torture random martial artists in the series. And something that you'll notice in older Baki is that there's always someone being punched so hard in the face that their eyes pop out. Call it weird, I kind of miss that in modern Baki, I'll be honest. And also, just to cut away and say something completely unrelated, but Baki lands this headbutt on Toba, and I immediately was like, oh, I've seen this somewhere before recently. And I had. It was when Baki did the same headbutt to Oliver. And I just get so much like joy seeing older moves and techniques be brought back, especially without it being spoon-fed to you. Like, it's just something you see and go, I've seen this before. And then when you realize what it's from, you just feel like a genius. Anyway, upon seeing that Toba is pretty worse for wear and that Baki isn't capitalizing on his opponent's weakness, Yujiro can be seen barely keeping his rage contained. He constantly berates his son from the stands out of earshot, and once the fight is over, he leaps from where he's standing into the arena to confront him. And we get a full face reveal. And I'll be honest, I think the early Yujiro is my preferred design. The Yujiro design that we have now, where he has like no neck and he's just this big monster, sort of spells it out too easily how much of a threat he is. This previous, almost inhuman look he had before in the past is a far more subtle depiction of the monster Yujiro really is. But that's just my preference. You can tell me your preference in the comments below. Aha. So after Yujiro reveals himself to the crowd, we see the shocked looks of recognition, including that of Doppo Orochi's. As Yujiro and Baki look to scrap, Doppo self-inserts himself into the conflict, declaring that it's been a long time since he'd last seen the ogre and that he's ready for him this time. He makes reference to the scars he gave Doppo last time and looks to Tokugawa to set up an official underground fight in a week's time. An official illegal fight. The date is set and the two fighters are practically salivating at the thought of fighting each other, and it's in the preparation that they both take ahead of this fight that goes a long way to reveal how they view martial arts and combat from a personal standpoint. Doppo returns to his dojo and practices the karate he's been perfecting for decades. Albeit he's practicing his own personal style of karate, which includes eye gouging, crotch shots, and other less savory techniques on his own pupils at Shinshinkai. Yujiro, however, and there's no other way to put this, takes such deep pleasure from fighting that it's actually sexual. And to be really crude about it, he was denied a fight that night, so he went out on the town and got his fighting release by attacking strangers in a local boxing gym. It's barely an analogy, to be honest, so don't be mad at me for putting it this way. Even during this display of dominance, he talks about how it's better than sex. And later that evening, or sometime later when he's sleeping, he starts to fantasize about killing people in his sleep. It's a wet dream. All right, he's having a wet dream. That's just what's happening. Whilst Doppo is dedicated to karate and takes joy in fighting, Yujiro is dedicated to fighting and uses martial arts as a tool to dominate people. Similar outcome, but the goal is very different. And knowing just how savage Yujiro is firsthand, Baki goes to Doppo to tell him not to fight his father. He puts it in no uncertain way that Yujiro will beat him and that Doppo is hopelessly outmatched. To prove to the son of the ogre that he is in fact a match, Doppo demonstrates his karate on Baki, which instantly changes his stance and has Baki claiming, yeah, you got this. Ooh, that's like the kiss of death. I mean, what a crazy ominous thing to say. We also get the reveal that a decade ago, when Doppo was still a young 45, he was mercilessly attacked by Yujiro whilst out on the town celebrating his recent success. He was ambushed and beaten by Yujiro, who casually called him a bum and walked away. Baki claims that this is still Doppo's fault, as being a martial artist means you should be ready for a fight at all time. There's no point blaming drunkenness or the fact you might be caught out unawares, which is something we see later on in the Death Row Inmate saga, manga, which was an entire arc dedicated to surprising your enemy at school or shopping and then beating the brakes off them to prove that you're a real warrior. That makes sense. On the morning of the fight, we see Doppo cleansing himself and acknowledging that at 55 years old, this is most likely to be the year he physically peaks as a karateka. His wife, Natsue Orochi, is confident that he will win, and with that, he sets off for the arena. For Yujiro, we see his special form of preparation, which is just to nap before the fight. This is what he does, and this is what supreme confidence in yourself looks like. Time for the fight, and it's one of my favorite in the series. As the two fighters are already in the ring, Doppo takes the initiative and catches Yujiro off guard before the fight has officially begun. It's a dirty move, and the crowd are actually quite shocked by Doppo's actions, but he's merely dishing out some revenge from the time he was attacked without warning by Yujiro 10 years ago, which is a crazy grudge to be holding on to, but fair enough. Yujiro then leaps into the air with Doppo on his back, which kicks up a dust cloud large enough to obscure Doppo, who lashes out with a kick so strong it sends the ogre skidding across the arena. Now, if you're an anime only, then you could be forgiven for thinking that this fight only mildly annoyed Yujiro, when in fact, some of what Doppo was capable of doing genuinely frightened him. Throughout the fight, Yujiro has this scared look on his face. He really has underestimated Doppo before this fight, and the original anime frankly does quite a poor job of conveying this, which is such a shame because this is early Baki. So having a slightly younger Yujiro who's being genuinely pressed by a powerhouse like Doppo Orochi is refreshing. It's in modern Baki that Yujiro refines this aura of invincibility, but at this point in chapter 56, it feels surreal seeing Yujiro have any expression other than rage or pure arrogance. Doppo follows up his initial attack with an axe kick, which is a Yujiro special, which the ogre catches and uses the momentum of to fling Doppo to the edge of the ring. However, similarly to Pickle in his fight against Jack, Doppo kicks out against the arena wall, closing the gap with Yujiro nearly instantly, landing another hit to his opponent. Doppo then takes up a defensive stance and Yujiro recovers and walks calmly over. In the stands, Motobe recognizes the walk as the ancient technique Udonde, but not before Doppo does, who attacks recklessly anyway and ends up taking a knee to the ribs and an elbow to the head. Doppo gets to his feet and adopts the Meiba stance, goading Yujiro into trying again. Yujiro takes up this challenge, walks over, looks to strike Doppo, but not before the God of War lands a straight punch to his chest once, then twice, then a third time. Off screen in the manga, whilst Baki is warming up for his fight, Doppo appears to have landed 5 punches in total, and I think that the nature of these hits being off screen is to convey 1, the speed at which Doppo is striking, and 2, Itagaki is having it done off screen because it's almost unbelievable. It's just so strange as a modern day reader to look back at any fight of Yujiro's where he isn't fighting Baki or Musashi and seeing him take hits unwillingly. It's just not the Yujiro we've come to know. Amazingly and frustratingly, Doppo reveals that he knows Yujiro has taken no actual damage, but I still believe that his initial reaction to being hit was real. The gulf between the two of them is still large, but Yujiro is genuinely impressed and kind of scared that Doppo has reached this level of power. Yujiro then attacks Doppo with the same flurry of attacks that he used to take down a polar bear, which I forgot to mention. Yujiro killed a polar bear with his bare hands. Ha! Bare hands. Having survived the onslaught, Doppo utilizes the technique Sangan, which allows him to move his eyes independently of each other like a gecko. Again, 10 likes and I'll learn this technique, for real. This gives him the reaction speed to block all of Yujiro's attacks, and again, with our attention focused on Baki, who is running in to see the fight, we see Yujiro recovering from a hit from Doppo, this time having been slammed into the wall right where his son is. We see the fear and the frustration in Yujiro's eyes, right before he takes a clean punch to the head that twists him all the way around, bringing him face to face with his son. The rage and shame that Yujiro feels at having been struck in front of his son pushes the ogre to unveil the demon back for Doppo and the crowd to see. This would mark the first time we get to see the demon back in action, as it had only been hinted at in Yujiro's confrontation with Motobe a few chapters previously. Having released the demon back, Yujiro tanks several hits from Doppo that would have previously had him flung about the ring, catches his fist, and breaks his little finger whilst throwing Doppo over his back. As a thank you for such a great fight, Yujiro reveals the full demon back to everyone's horror. His unnatural arrangement of muscles do of course resemble a demon's face, and it becomes a staple of the series, with Baki eventually developing his own. Now powered up, Yujiro takes a massive chunk out of Doppo's arm that lands with a sickening thud on the floor, before following that up with multiple attacks across his body. His defenses having been brought down, Doppo's student Suedo charges into the arena, attacking Yujiro to defend the honor of karate. It's useless, and Yujiro lazily easily knocks him out before turning his attention back to Doppo. In the confusion, Doppo intends to land a killing blow, but Yujiro is faster, concussing and possibly destroying Doppo's eardrums. Defeated, Doppo slumps to the floor unconscious. Yujiro lowers his arms and walks away, with a slightly annoyed expression at the fight having come to an end. However, Doppo isn't one to be simply defeated. He stands up and counts the injuries he's received, which is too many to list, and charges forward again. Yujiro smiles, grateful to Doppo for wanting to continue, before he closes in, sticks his thumb under Doppo's eye, and slams it with his free hand, popping the eye from its socket. Doppo indicates the fight isn't finished, and Yujiro, with a joyful expression, punches the Tiger Slayer so hard in the chest that his heart stops. Doppo dies, on his feet, standing, like Whitebeard. The crowd have just witnessed the greatest karateka of all time die at the hands of the monster that is Yujiro Hanma. But we know this isn't the end. A recently introduced Kureha Shinogi uses a heart massage to resuscitate Doppo. When Yujiro hears about this, he's shocked of course, but ultimately seems content. He's now far more interested in the man who brought him back to life and is now fighting his son. But that's sort of it, really. Yujiro and Doppo cross paths many more times in the series, but the relationship has fundamentally changed. Doppo fought his best against Yujiro and lost. There's no shame in this, like the shame he felt about having been beaten the first time, and for Yujiro, he just had a good time. Beef squashed. Doppo would fight Yujiro's protege Amanai Yu in the maximum tournament, and on the brink of defeat, Yujiro would intervene and strike Amanai down for being a coward. When Doppo quips about Yujiro minding his own business, Yujiro doesn't take the injured Doppo seriously at all, even going so far as to suggest that he's just speaking up to save face in front of his wife. Something that Itagaki likes to make clear is the similarities between both fighters. Like I said previously, both are warriors, top of their respective martial arts practices, and revered as living weapons. Another thing they have in common is legacy. Whilst Yujiro fathered Baki with the intention of raising him to be a strong fighter for him to beat in the future, Doppo witnessed the potential in a young Katsumi who he adopted after his father died in the circus. Doppo saw the future of karate in a young Katsumi and taught him everything he knew. And Doppo was kind of right. Katsumi has gone on to be seen as the new inheritor of the world's strongest karate user, and that's enough for his father. Sure, he'll spar with his son, but the desire to have a child wasn't to destroy him in the future like Yujiro wanted. So are Doppo and Yujiro similar? Very much so. They are, however, very different people, and that cannot be made more clear by how they are treated by those around them. Doppo is treated with respect and reverence, and Yujiro is feared by everyone just in his general vicinity. In the end, the biggest consequence of this fight is that Doppo joins the very small club of people who Yujiro might consider a friend, or at least something close to that. The respect Doppo earned from having actually survived Yujiro extends to the martial artist in the world, but also to Yujiro himself. The two have several social interactions throughout the series, and Doppo gets some actual insights into Yujiro's way of thinking and his life. He's there to witness the father-son fight, and he can accurately understand what it means for both Yujiro and Baki in that moment. He's jealous at times of what he's seeing, but he's also heartbroken on Baki's behalf. Doppo just knows the Hanmas very well. He's like the closest thing they have to a family friend. The biggest takeaway from this video, I would say, is never forget that Doppo Orochi was beating the crap out of Yujiro Hanma for a hot minute there, until plot got in the way and turned the fight on its head. Doppo's the GOAT, and I'll put him top of A tier in this tier list that I haven't made, and have only ranked Gaira on previously. I personally still see Doppo as being stronger than Katsumi, especially after the recent Baki Rahen chapters, and he's just one of my favorite recurring main cast characters in the series. And he's clearly one of Itagaki's favorites too. When the world of Baki was smaller, he was clearly seen as one of the strongest fighters in the world, maybe even second or third, and even with the insane number of fighters that have been introduced since then, he can still hold his own. He's a monster in his own right, and I hope that continues. I also really hope he stays stronger than Katsumi, but that's because I hate Katsumi, the absolute fraud. Anyway, you know the drill. Say hi to your parents from me. Watch a video here on Baki and another video here on something else Baki. Peace.